Happy to be here today. Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool. Super happy to be here. So I guess we start off by talking about good news. Good news or advertisements, anybody?
I have. Hello. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I am Subhaya Nagabadi. Hi, everyone. The good news that I want to share is that we know the Nagabadis, each life is precious, started a soft launch or a pilot program called Cross Cultural Experiences. It's like where if you go to foreign country where we don't know even the language, how we have to immerse ourselves. So we can do the same thing here in Valparaiso because we have so many ethnic groups here. So we are calling a pilot program because we want to try how it goes. And I'm going to send an email to Dawn so she can forward to everybody.
Sure.
Awesome. Very cool. Anyone else have any good news? Or anything
Mr.
they'd like
Holt?
to share?
Larry?
Hi. Just wanted to mention that my good news is twofold. Saturday, my wife and I just got our second Pfizer vaccine. So we hope we're close to good to go. And this weekend, we're going to go see our granddaughter play basketball. We haven't been able to do that. We've been watching it in video and live stream. But now we're going to be able to go to a game and watch her play. They just won the sectional, and their record is 18-1. So we're looking forward to going deeper if we can, but it's going to be fun.
Larry, where do you go? Where do you go? Is it in town?
Andrean.
Ah.
Good school. All right, awesome. That's really good stuff. Very cool. Any other good news?
I have good news. Our oldest son, Ben, turned 21 on Thursday and then proposed to his girlfriend on Saturday. So they will be planning a wedding. Very exciting.
Awesome.
Very good. Congratulations.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
very cool. Anyone else with any good news or advertisement?
Bill?
Yes. Am I on?
Yes.
Okay, I always have trouble with that. How about Valpo beating Drake yesterday, who was undefeated and ranked number 25? And more good news, I get my wellness check on Wednesday, and I found out this morning it's going to be virtual. I don't know how that will work out. Friday, I get my second COVID shot.
Very
All right.
cool. Nice. All right, anybody else? All right, well, I didn't get a list of the birthday announcements, but we'll just say happy birthday to everybody that has a birthday in February. I hope everybody has a good birthday. Enjoy it. Happy birthday. I'm not gonna
Isn't today your birthday?
It is my birthday today.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, thanks.
Mine was on February 2nd.
What's that?
My birthday was on February 2nd.
Awesome. February birthdays are the best. Happy birthday.
Yeah.
All right, very cool. Well, then I was just going to leave with a little bit of Super Bowl notes that I looked up this morning. And the reason why I looked it up is because yesterday I have 3 daughters who have they have not once watched a football game in their life. And yesterday they were glued to the TV because I happened to buy squares for them. And so I'm like, well, that's interesting because they didn't want to leave the Super Bowl party that we were at. And they wanted to continue watching just because they wanted to know whether or not they won on these squares. So I looked up today. Super Bowl has always been known for the largest betting event, I guess, when it comes to betting. And then yesterday, over the weekend, a Texas businessman I guess, won over $6 million on the Super Bowl yesterday, which is one of the largest wins in the Super Bowl history. So pretty interesting. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But thanks, guys, and I'll turn it back over.
Great. Thanks, Rob. And I am sorry, it was my fault not getting you the birthdays and the anniversaries. So we'll do that next week, everyone. We'll celebrate all of you.
Hey, no worries. I hate saying everybody's name anyways. It's horrible.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Well, I will now turn it over to Leslie for today's program.
Thank you, Dawn. I appreciate that. And I have the privilege of doing the introduction of an amazing person in our community, but also one of my friends. So Amanda, thank you for being here with us. Dr. Amanda Zalahosky is a licensed clinical and forensic psychologist and attorney specializing in trauma. As an associate professor of psychology at Valparaiso University, she directs the Psychology, Law, and Trauma Lab, where she conducts research on the impact of childhood trauma. In addition, Dr. Zalahosky provides training and consultation to numerous mental health agencies, legal, educational, and child welfare agencies. She recently completed a study on the impact of COVID-19 on parents and children, which led to the creation of a nonprofit organization. Pandemicparenting.org is her organization, and we'll share that in the chat box for you. She's also the wife of our most rambunctious Valparaiso Rotary member. She sent that to me, and the mom of 3 young children. She has spent the pandemic mostly just trying to make sure that her kids have clothes on when they burst into her virtual meetings. I happened to see one of those meetings that you posted on Facebook, where the little Batman guy came through the back door. But before we do that, we have one guest intro that we want to run really quick, and then we'll turn it over to Amanda. So Dawn, if you want to share your screen, and then
Sure.
when that's done, you can unshare your screen and we'll go to Amanda.
Okay.
So, thanks for being with us.
Oh, God. I'm scared.
Just,
I think you go to slideshow.
yeah, let me try again. Sorry.
And now you know who the guest intro. Did you not know that he did that?
I did not. And with all due respect, don't you think I see that face enough? No, I'm just kidding. Oh, you probably got to share your sound when you share your screen, Dawn.
Yeah.
Click that little box on the bottom.
Is there a
Again,
box on the bottom?
Yeah, when you click
Okay.
share screen, look on the bottom left, it'll say share computer sound.
Oh, it does. I'm sorry. I ran through this morning and had it, and then I
Oh,
forgot
no
that.
problem.
And
Sorry.
then just pull it back to the start too, okay?
Okay, absolutely.
In the entire world, my wife, Dr. Amanda Zalahosky. Now listen, her bio is much too long for me to do it justice. Leslie, if you don't mind putting the link to her bio in the chat box, that would be awesome. Folks, here's the one thing that you need to know about my wife. Her life mantra is be the one. And that's one of the reasons she's the most selfless person I've ever met. She's always doing everything else for everyone else. Be the one is her mantra. She actually put it up in our boys' bedroom to remind them that whenever they see something that needs to be done, be the one to do it. Whenever you see somebody who's being picked on, be the one to defend them. And this is the mantra that my wife lives by. Occasionally, it has gotten her into trouble. There was the time, this is going back a little while, when we lived in Boston. She was at a local mall by herself, and she saw this big guy attacking this young woman. And my wife looked around and she couldn't believe nobody else was doing something about this. So my 5'1" wife goes up and starts almost accosting this man for what he's doing to this young woman. Turns out the guy is a plainclothes mall cop who was detaining a shoplifter. But Amanda didn't believe him when he first told her that. And so he's trying to hold this shoplifter in one arm and trying to get his badge out to show Amanda with the other hand, just to show her that everything was on the up and up. So occasionally be the one who's gotten Amanda in trouble, but more often than not, it's the reason she does all the incredible stuff that she does. She's currently a psych professor at Valparaiso University. This upcoming fall, how cool is this? She's going to be starting a doctoral program in psychology for PNW, while at the same time creating a much needed mental health clinic for the region. But today, she's here to talk about something different. Being the one for Amanda during this pandemic has been to help and to empower families who have really struggled throughout this past year. She created a nonprofit called Pandemic Parenting with one of her colleagues up in the Toronto area, and they've been getting resources into the hands of people who need it the most: parents, kids, teenagers who are all struggling during this pandemic. So without any further ado, let me introduce Dr. Amanda Zelahusky.
Wow, how do you follow that? I mean, anything I say now is just going to be a complete disappointment. So, that was very sweet. Thank you. Steve was feeling badly that he couldn't be with you all today. It really is his, like, one of his favorite parts of each week is these Rotary meetings. And so I will not be anywhere near as loud or charming as Steve is. But I will do my best to represent our family in this presentation. So thank you so much for having me. Thanks for the invitation, Leslie. I'm so excited to tell you a bit about the work we've been doing. And my big hope in giving you this information is that you will share all these free resources with others, with people who can really use them right now, as I know many of us have struggled our way through this pandemic in lots of different ways. So I'm going to take a minute to also share my screen, make sure I follow my own advice and click on what I am supposed to. All right. So you should hopefully be able to see that. You're good. You see the title slide. Excellent. All right. So parenting through a pandemic, using the psychological science to help us cope. That is my contact information and that of my colleague and friend and co-founder, which I will talk about in a bit. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how this work came to be and, tell you a little bit about the resources that are out there. So, but I want to start with asking you to just sort of take a moment and think about if you are a parent, what pandemic parenting has looked like for you. Maybe you are a pandemic grandparent, what that has looked like for you. And even if neither of those things, just try to think of one word you would use to describe your own pandemic parenting, journey. What has this experience been like for you in one word? And if you could just pop that in the chat, I'd love for you to get to see from each other, the range, I imagine, of what those experiences have looked like for all of us. So just one word you would use to describe your pandemic parenting or grandparenting experience, or just your pandemic experience in general. So I'll give you a second to do that in the chat box. Yeah, some great examples I'm seeing come in. For some, this has been a positive experience in many ways, meaning more, close family time, maybe some more focus in your life. For others, it has been, exhausting, frustrating, stressful, uncertain. So you're seeing a huge range in our experiences there in that chat box. So I thank you for noting in there what this has been like for you. My word, when I just think about pandemic parenting, would probably be relentless. For those of us, especially who have young kids at home, who are working parents, the lockdowns and need to provide 24-hour care for our kids, manage their remote learning, manage them at home, supervise them while trying to also do our jobs, all within the confines of the same home, has just been relentless. There really has been no break for us from each other, for us to be able to sort of catch our breath and, regroup, as is sometimes the case when I would put my little ones on their school bus to go off to school. So relentless would probably be my word. So I want to just show you a couple examples, we've seen in the media. This was actually pre-pandemic, but you may remember seeing this BBC interview where this individual was doing an interview and his little toddler, you might see in the background, busted in. And, when we all sort of found that adorable and funny, we couldn't have imagined that it would become our lives just a year or two later when that first aired, and people weren't really used to seeing things like that then. You sort of fast forward to what life has become for all of us now. And this is an example of a scientist, Dr. Gretchen Goldman, who was doing an interview on CNN a few months ago. And she felt it important to just show the honest side of this. Like, this is what you see on the news, but this is what was actually happening in my home. She's surrounded by kids' toys. She's trying to look professional and, sort of pull it off, as many of us have been trying to do now for almost a year. So, this is my co-founder, Dr. Lindsay Malloy, out at Ontario Tech University, and her kids. And as Leslie alluded to, this is a picture in one of my classes that I teach for Valpo. It was a night class. It was about 9 p.m., I think, when in this very same room I'm in right now, you see these doors behind me, little Batman, kind of just came on in and wanted to say hi, good night one more time, ask for a few things, just in the middle of my class. And thankfully, I work with students who are very sort of forgiving and understanding about this, but this has just become many of our realities, right? The absolute inability to separate work from family life, from personal time, even our spaces, no longer have any of that separation. So in our home, it was this constant negotiation of, whose work mattered more that day, that hour. Okay, well, you have this meeting, so I'll watch the kids and, manage them then, and then we'll swap in 2 hours. And it was just this constant negotiation. And then even within our family, which kid was going to get my attention, which kid is going to be plopped in front of a screen for this hour so I can help this other kid with his e-learning. Our kids are ages 11, 8, and 5. And so very different needs as far as school management through the rambunctious, Batman toddler there who needs constant supervision, lest I catch him jumping off a counter somewhere. So it's this constant juggling and, management of our time, which then, of course, translated into, for both Steve and myself, in many cases, our work hours would become, maybe 9 p.m. to 1 or 2 a.m. when we didn't have to be managing kids. So after they went to bed. So one of the things that's been really important to remember and think about and reflect on throughout this pandemic is that, I loved this quote by Damien Barr a few months ago. We're not all in the same boat. We are all in the same storm. Some of us are on super yachts, some have just the one oar, but it looks differently, right? We are in what, as a trauma psychologist, I would consider sort of a collective trauma, a global crisis. We're all experiencing the same crisis, but in very different ways, depending on our layers of privilege, our resources, flexibility of our employer, all kinds of different factors. So the headlines are also not painting a very positive picture of what this is going to mean for us long term. So here are just a few from the last year, right? The COVID-19 crisis too few are talking about, healthcare workers' mental health. The kids aren't all right. Parents are not okay. Half of Americans are suffering mental health issues during coronavirus. The levels of our grief have been quite serious, throughout the last year. So we're seeing a lot of challenges and a lot of concerns about our long-term mental health, particularly for parents, and navigating this. So this all sort of came about because I launched a project, as Leslie mentioned, in March of last year. So it's hard to believe that we're coming just on the 1-year anniversary of this for all of us. But as a child trauma researcher, one who focuses on things like risk and how early childhood trauma goes on to lead to adverse consequences throughout life, the first thing I thought about, when I started to understand what was going to happen with COVID-19 was the child maltreatment rates, right? When you have kids who are locked in their homes with really stressed parents, their stress increasing because of, financial concerns and so on. And we don't have them in schools where we know that schools tend to be the eyes and ears, right? That are sort of, detecting child abuse. They're the first responders in many cases in those situations. We're going to see our child maltreatment rates skyrocket, was my concern. So that was happening along the same time. I was, of course, terrified about, how am I going to do this as a working parent with young kids? how are we going to get through this and get our work done and, you know, tend to our kids' needs and mental health through all of this disruption in their lives as well. So I did what, you know, maybe a lot of social scientists do. You know, we study the very thing that we're concerned about. And so launched this project, had you know, the privilege of over 450 parents participating from all over the US. And I wanted to know how how COVID-19 was impacting their families in terms of parent stress and also the children's, you know, mental health and behavior. So we looked at it over the first 3 months of the pandemic, and I'll just share a couple quick findings, but then I'll sort of talk about why that led me to launch this nonprofit organization. So the sort of quick snapshot here is that, you know, parents of younger kids, so kids between kindergarten and around 5th grade, reported higher levels of parenting stress over time. And one of the differences we also found there is that, you know, younger kids tended to have higher externalizing issues. So what that means is things like aggression, you know, tantrums, disruptive behaviors. We saw those rates go up for younger kids. For older kids, middle schoolers, high schoolers, we saw higher rates of what are called internalizing issues or problems. So withdrawal, levels of depression, just sort of isolating themselves, not wanting to do things or activities that they used to enjoy. About 1 in 4 kids was rated by their parents as showing clinical levels of emotional or behavioral difficulties in just the first 3 months of the pandemic. So these were some of the findings that kind of stayed with me. You know, we asked a lot about what specifically parents were worried about, what kids were worried about. And so, you know, in the summer, I was kind of analyzing some of that data. I think many of us thought the pandemic would be over by then, you know, by the time the fall rolled around. Of course, we were wrong. And as that started to become clear, I knew this colleague of mine in Canada was doing a similar study. And we just sort of put our heads together, and, you know, both of us were frustrated with how slow the scientific process can tend to be, that, you know, we'll be lucky if these results are published within the next year. That's just how long it takes to analyze data and go through the publication process. And we felt like, you know, we're sitting on information that could help families right now. They're having to make decisions about school for their kids this fall. So there's got to be a better way we can get this information out there. And at the same time, you know, with both of us being psychologists, we had lots of friends reaching out to us to ask questions or, you know, say, gosh, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm really struggling in this way. And we'd say, oh, well, it's because of A, B, C, and D. So we take for granted how our training is sometimes ingrained in us, and forget that others don't just have access to that information, you know, at the ready. So we wanted to be of help and tried to figure out the best way we could do that. And so that's how Pandemic Parenting was born. You know, we started out just doing a couple free webinars. We wanted to share the science, give psychology away, created this web platform, working with several former VU students, VU alums that, you know, helped us to build the website, work on some of the video production pieces of things. And our goal was always to be relatable, accessible. You know, Lindsay and I are both pretty honest about our own parenting experiences, our shortfalls, you know, always putting out there that we're not perfect at this and we're struggling right along with you. But maybe there are some ways we can translate the science that can be helpful and that is also credible, because it's very hard for parents to weed through all of the information that is out there. And try to figure out, you know, what is actually credible, and who should I be listening to, and under what circumstances. So these are some of the things that are out there. We got some early press, you know, by some fortune and good luck from the Washington Post and a couple other media outlets, which really helped us to spread our reach fairly quickly. Which was our goal, right? How do we get this information to the most vulnerable families as quickly as we can in the sort of fastest and most accessible ways that we can? So that kind of helped us really launch in those first few weeks. We do these bi-weekly webinars. So every 2 weeks, it's another topic. We try to stay in front of what topics families are struggling with right now. These are a couple examples of topics that we've done. You know, building resilience in your kids and in yourself, challenges with being pregnant or becoming a new parent during the pandemic. We did one in October on anti-racist pandemic parenting. So there's, you know, all of the webinars are always free and the recordings are available as soon as, you know, the webinar is over. Some people choose to attend live, which is great. Then they can ask their questions in real time. We always do the webinars later in the evenings, so usually around 8 p.m. Central Time, to try to make sure that parents aren't trying to compete with bedtime and dinner time or their work hours. In addition to the webinars, you know, we have a whole YouTube channel where we distill some of the best quotes and highlights from each webinar in these like 1 to 2 minute snack break videos, because most people, including us, don't have time to sit through entire 1 hour webinars. So we try to, even from those conversations, distill out the best hits or most helpful tips that kind of came from those conversations. We partnered with Zulily, which is an online retailer, in the fall to be putting out these blogs on, again, many of these hot topics, full of tips and tools where we're distilling the science down into ways that are just really digestible. You know, here are 5 tips about this, or 3 ways to think about doing this. So you can see some examples there. All of this is also available on the website. One of the ones I wanted to really highlight that may be helpful is, you know, one that we put out in December around long distance pandemic grandparenting. So I appreciated, you know, hearing Larry's joy at being able to finally go to his granddaughter's basketball game. And this is something we know has been a huge struggle for grandparents, is how terribly you miss your grandkids, how you wish you could be helping your adult children navigate all of these pandemic parenting challenges. And so we wrote about 25 ways to stay connected long distance through the pandemic. So these are, I think, just great ideas, even after the pandemic's over, if you live quite a distance from your grandkids. So I encourage you to check out that blog, which you can also find on the Pandemic Parenting website, which is posted in the chat. The best ways to find out the new topics that are coming, all of these resources, are to follow us on social media or to sign up for the email list, which you can do on the website. So all of that is there and easy to find. So I want to just share sort of a quick example of what I mean by using the psychological science to help parents cope right now. So these are some of the topics and specific aspects of the psychological science we've been featuring. Things like decision fatigue, which I'll talk about in a second. What does the developmental science say about how to talk to kids of different ages about COVID-19? What do we mean by grief? What sorts of things are our kids grieving right now? Are we as adults grieving? What are some specific considerations, say, for single parents or those who are co-parenting? What does the science say about screen time? That was a hugely popular one we did in the fall, as was the one we did 2 weeks ago on teen mental health. You know, we had lots of specific questions about teens, particularly. You're probably seeing lots of headlines about the rising teen suicide rates. So that was a great one we had with a local Valpo high schooler serving as our moderator, which I think was really helpful to have her perspective. So just lots of different, you know, snippets and, again, topics that we know are really on the hearts and minds of parents right now that we try to focus on. And part of what has been so great about this platform is our ability to bring in all of these experts from all over the world. So experts on each of these topics we have join us for these conversations, and, you know, they share some of the best parts of their research, again, in really accessible ways for parents that they can apply and implement in their lives immediately. One of the topics that has come up a lot is, you know, this idea of sort of parenting guilt, or what does good enough parenting look like right now, right? Lots of us, myself included, struggling with, you know, how do I do this better? Are my kids really struggling? Am I giving them what they need when they have lost so much throughout the last year? So this term, good enough parenting, was coined by the British pediatrician and psychoanalyst D.W. Winnicott in his famous book, Playing and Reality. So I have come to understand through my parenting journey that there is no such thing as a perfect parent, right? That instead we should be, you know, working to become the right parent for our child right now, which means being able to, you know, adjust to be the right parent for each of my kids as I've needed to be at that time in their lives. And recognizing that that's going to change as they grow up, and who they need me to be will change, and I'll need to adapt in different ways. So maybe parents don't need to worry so much about whether they are good at, you know, whether they're perfect parents, but maybe it's more about whether I'm sort of good enough for the situation and whether I'm the right fit right now for the needs that are there. So much of this has to do with just sort of thinking about, you know, what do kids need right now? And we'll talk more about that. And what does good enough look like during a pandemic? So some of this has to do with adjusting our expectations. And I want to give you an example of, you know, one of the experts we were able to bring in the fall was the world-renowned child psychiatrist, Dr. Bruce Perry, who wrote a book called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, that I can't recommend enough if you are a parent, a grandparent, if you work with children. So he was gracious enough to share his wisdom with us. And here is what he wanted parents to know about this idea of being good enough and adjusting your expectations.
Let's talk about expectations, right? And what you really want to do is sort of focus on what are the core needs that these kids have right now. The core need is that they need to feel loved and they need to feel safe. And so honestly, you know, whatever it takes for you to make your kid feel loved and safe, whether it's like, you know, more hugs, doing more things with them, if there are expectations that you feel are getting in the way of your child feeling good about themselves, feeling like learning is fun, learning is good, you should stop them. And you should notify your school that this is your experience, this is your opinion, this is your, you just think that it makes things worse when you have these unrealistic expectations.
So what do kids need right now, right? They need to feel loved and they need to feel safe. And this is something that we have been reminding parents again and again throughout their, sort of beating themselves up or their guilt around, am I good enough right now? Another example of some of the psychological science we've been sharing is around this idea of decision fatigue, right? So when we are traumatized or at a minimum under extreme stress, we lose our ability to generate creative solutions. And so, we're seeing parents use words like drained, I feel paralyzed, I feel blocked, right? Making simple decisions like what to eat, what to do next, which work task to tackle first. These things are bringing people to tears. I have certainly been one of them at times. Just the idea of like, what are we going to have for dinner tonight, could overwhelm me. And it's because, we're experiencing this need to make decisions constantly about things that don't have clear answers. Is it safe for me to go to the store? Is it okay for me to send my kids to school? What is it going to look like if one of us has COVID-19? How are we going to be impacted? We're having to make all of these decisions, sometimes on an hour-to-hour basis, that don't have clear guidance. And that is exhausting and it's not sustainable. So we've been trying to share a lot of what we know around the science of decision fatigue and what it means for people when it comes to making decisions. And so, for example, this is another, of the blogs and resources we put out are ways that you can reduce your decision fatigue, right? Trying to limit when and where and what kinds of decisions you're having to make on a daily basis. So, that's just sort of an example of some of the things we've gone through. In addition, we always try to post these reflection questions. And one of the things you'll hear me say in just a second is our encouragement to, make sure that as you're sharing these free resources, we want people to have conversations in their community groups, in your Zoom happy hour with your other friends, where you're thinking about how has this impacted me and my kids or my family? What does good enough parenting, or in some people's cases, what does good enough grandparenting look like for you right now? What can I do to make my kids or grandkids feel loved and safe and thought of? What are some ways we can shift our expectations? So we try to always include these reflection questions so that you can take and use these free resources in your organizations and community groups to try to help others feel that support and build some of this connection and support. These are some of the greatest hits, things that we hear ourselves reminding parents over and over again, right? We need to adjust our expectations of ourselves and our kids, as you heard Dr. Perry mention. Acknowledge and respect that this is not normal or sustainable. So to be holding ourselves to standards we might have had for ourselves from last February just isn't reasonable, right? This isn't a sustainable way for us to live. Kids need, as I mentioned, to feel loved and safe, and they also need predictability, routine, and sort of moderate doses of stress where we can contain that. And that's how they build resilience, which we have lots of resources on the site around building resilience in your kids. And what we've also learned is that what parents need is to feel seen and supported, to know that they're not alone in this, despite their social media feed maybe making them feel like everybody else is doing this perfectly, that we are all navigating this in the best way we know how. And some of that is around having systemic barriers removed, which has been a real challenge for a lot of people. So I'll end just to sort of, pitch our next free webinar, which is this week, which is called the Not So Get Along Gang, Managing Sibling Conflict During COVID-19, which I will admit that I begged for this topic because I can't get my boys off of each other with all this family time we've had in our home. And then just to let you know how you can help support pandemic parents. Share these resources. Again, everything is free. We want people to access them and use them. We've, somehow, again, through luck and our relationships, been able to pull in so many of these wonderful experts to talk with us and share their wisdom with parents. We encourage you to submit questions or topics, or if your organization wants to partner with us in some way, we'd love to talk with you about, again, better ways we can keep supporting parents and all of us throughout this pandemic. So that is it. I wanted to be sure to try to leave some time for questions. Steve told me I better not end late, that is very frowned upon in the Rotary. So I did my best.
Yeah, and I want to thank you, Amanda. I want to add, if you want to support her organization, it is a nonprofit, and the work that you're doing is truly, truly amazing. So I just wanted to throw that out because you didn't. So
thank you.
Yeah. We'll turn it back to Dawn, and maybe you can manage questions.
Sure. Does anyone have any questions for Amanda?
Deb Wapple.
Deb does.
Okay.
Hold on. I'm asking to unmute her.
Okay, just a little story. I'm the mother of boys, grown all grandchildren now. So one time I couldn't get them off of each other in the house, so I sent them outside. I said, just take it outside then. Their dad pulled in. So he said, if you have time to fight, you have time to work. So he took them out with shovels to dig ditches.
I love that. Taking notes. Thank you. I love it.
Probably wasn't the only time that happened.
That's awesome.
Anyone
He gave a
else?
very nice presentation.
Thank you.
I was just wondering, what's been the most surprising thing that you found, Amanda? I mean, I love that you said that, you know, enough or good enough is good enough. And for me, I put the word in the chat box that it's been a roller coaster for our family. I don't have school age children, but it surely seems like the stress goes like this. So I'm just wondering, with your unique background as a lawyer and a psychologist studying trauma, what surprised you, if anything?
I think two things. One is, I mean, it never ceases to amaze me, are the human capacity for resilience, right? Like, I think if you had told any of us this time last year, this is what the next year was going to look like for us, and here's how we're going to sort of figure it out and make all these pivots, we would have been like, are you kidding? No way. That's going to be, you know, awful. And it has been awful in many ways. But it always amazes me how people can sort of support each other and come together, how villages are still showing up for families virtually in creative ways, that we're finding ways to support each other. And so the human spirit and resilience always amazes me, especially in my work of seeing people go through really horrific things and finding ways with the right supports in place to navigate those. So that's one thing. The other thing I would say, and I'm sure this is maybe not going to be a surprise to many of you, is the kids, in my view, are doing so much better at navigating this than us grownups, right? So all of the fears around, you know, masks and how will my kids adjust, and like, they're doing fine for the most part. You know, of course, there are exceptions to that when you add in things like other risk factors or, you know, special needs, that sort of thing. But for the most part, the kids adapt so much better than we do as grownups. You know, well, how are our kids going to do this? And all these things we're worried about. I think it's important for people to remember that they take their cue from the grownups in their lives. And so if we sort of set the tone that it's going to be okay and it'll be different, but we're going to figure it out. And, you know, what are some things that did feel different? Because sometimes we make assumptions about what they're going to be distressed by, and we're wrong about that. So I think just our need to listen to kids and know that they take their cue from us, and maybe we can take a page out of their book a little more often than we tend to as stubborn grownups.
I just wanted to say thank you. And I love the suggestion that we can take stuff that we learn now and use it later also.
Mhm.
And I'm definitely going to share some of your stuff or share your website or whatever it is with my kids.
Please do. Thank you.
And, you know, kids have done very well. My 11-year-old started a podcast on birds. You know, he's a very avid bird watcher.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, their ability to adapt to technology is much better than ours too, right?
Yes. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Looked like Silva had a question. Silva, you need to unmute.
Yes, I was going to ask, are you talking to different school systems so that, you know, because all the things that you can provide are really important. Are you connecting with different school systems or organizations to partner and work together?
Yes, great question. Thank you for asking that. Yes, we are contacted often by school systems, PTOs, you know, you name it. We know that there's a huge need right now to support teachers' mental health, students' mental health. And so as many of those presentations that we can do within our bandwidth, we try to. But the other thing is we always put the resources out the way we did with the intention that take that webinar or take those 5 1-minute clips, and then you go facilitate that conversation at your school, because you have the relationships already with those parents and those teachers and those kids. So we'd actually much rather, I mean, again, we're happy to step in where we can be helpful, but we'd much rather people take all these free resources and go use them in whatever way you'd like to, because people already know you and trust you, and probably would rather hear it from you than from this, random psychologist in Indiana.
Great.
Anyone else? All right. Well, Amanda, thank you so very much for being here with us today. I will echo everyone else. Great presentation, such wonderful, valuable information, and we do appreciate the resources too for continued support and help.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for giving my husband something to do for an hour on Mondays to take him out of my hair. I am deeply grateful.
Wonderful. All right. Well, next week we do have Bill Higbee with our grant recipients. They will be here to talk about how our grants have helped them further their projects in their organizations. And also wanted to make everyone aware that our centennial celebration that was set for April 15th has been postponed to a later date. So we will keep you posted, but that has been postponed. It was in the newsletter, but we wanted to make sure everyone was aware of it. All right, if everyone would please join me in the 4-way test. Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Have a wonderful week, everyone. Stay safe and warm.
Thank you. Thanks, Amanda.